What was your first game? First game you ref, do you remember that?
I do. Reggie Miller makes a move, and I called an offensive foul. The place went nuts. The game couldn't be played for about 20 minutes.
Who were some of the toughest guys to ref because they talk so much smack to you?
He waited for me out in the parking lot and jumped out from behind a pole and literally wanted to fist fight me.
And you're saying you didn't fix the game. They're saying you fixed the game.
They did different things to plant seeds in the NBA office and the referee's mind if they felt that their star player wasn't getting the treatment that they deserved. Mark Cuban really started to go overboard with that and bombard the league office with situations where he felt his team was getting screwed.
You also say that most referees gamble. This is a crazy idea.
They were making millions of dollars on it, and that he needed to continue to get those plays. And if not, he was going to expose me to the NBA or have somebody visit my wife or kids in Florida.
Flat out.
Flat out.
So today we have another interesting guest with us. Me, as a big sports fan, I always followed, basketball, baseball, and sometimes when you got the referees that affect the game, you get pissed off when a referee makes a good call or a bad call, and you wonder, is there something going on here? So today we have Tim Donaghy. Let me tell you a little bit about Tim Donaghy, his background. He reffed from 1994 to 07, which is a very interesting 13-year career because during that time he reffed with MJ's peak, Kobe's peak, LeBron's peak, Shaq, a lot of other names. So we're going to get into a lot of those personalities. But also there was a part where from 03 to 07, he was gambling while refereeing, which ended up costing him his job and did 15 months in prison. And he wrote a book we'll talk about. Very, very interesting stories that if you're a sports fan or somebody that even is in that world, you're definitely going to be blown away by some of the stories that he has. So with that being said, Tim Donaghy, thanks for being on Valuetainment.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we had an interesting lunch earlier. Those conversations were good. So I wish some of it was recorded, but I'm sure we're going to touch up on some of the stories. So Tim, before we get into the whole story, the first question I want to know, when I go back and I called people around who went to school with you, I found a few guys that went to school with you who knew you when you were 16, 17, 18. I asked them, I said, how was he in school? And they told me what they thought how you were in school. But I want to ask you, who were you in high school? If I went to high school with you, who was Tim?
Definitely the class clown. I like to push the envelope a little bit and have a lot of fun. So definitely the guy that was trying to make everybody laugh.
Were you a chippy guy? Were you always a competitive guy? Were you from a family that you had high expectations? Where was that coming from?
Definitely, probably overly competitive. Even today when I do something with the kids, talk about having four daughters, whatever it is, if we're playing a game of cards, I want to win. So, overly competitive, at every aspect of, you play to win. That's the way I grew up.
Did you play all sports or was it mainly basketball?
Mainly basketball, baseball, a little bit of football when I was younger, but the main thing that I enjoyed the most was basketball.
And you're a pretty competitive basketball player. I mean, like you played, you actually know how to play the game.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, when I got involved in doing something competitive, it wasn't something where, second place was an option. You played to win and win at all cost.
Is that a standard that was set by pops or mom? Was that like a family standard, like you better compete?
I think it's just a standard growing up with, four brothers. Everybody was competitive in the area that I grew up in. You just played to win. There was no way that anyone wanted to come in second place. Where if you went home in second place, you better go home with a bunch of blood on you. I
read somewhere that you had a one time you came home and you had a third place trophy or second place trophy. You pulled down the window, you threw it out because you didn't want to show your dad you were second or third place. Is that
right? Right over the Walt Whitman Bridge. Rolled the window down, threw it right in the water. Yeah.
Literally.
Absolutely.
And you remember this?
Oh, sure, because. I had older brothers that, had trophies. We all lined them up on the heaters in the bedroom, and, nobody had a second place trophy. It wasn't like it is today where everybody gets a participation trophy. It was a first place trophy or nothing. So you definitely didn't want to walk in my house with that.
Is that competitiveness, like the part I got 3 kids myself, so I'm just curious to know, was it driven by somebody? Meaning, was it just because you had 4 brothers, 4 of you, and obviously that's a competitive environment, period, but you're in Philly, which is a very competitive sports city. All sports is competitive. And the culture in Philadelphia, especially where you grew up at, So was your dad expecting all of you guys to perform at a high level, or no, it was purely just the brothers?
No, absolutely. I mean, my dad, had high expectations for all of us, and whatever we got involved in, even today, when I got in all my trouble,
Yeah.
we'd have conversations. I'd be like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. And he said, I don't care if you have to dig ditches for a life, just be the best ditch digger you can be.
He would tell you that?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely.
So even when you went through it, he still kept the same mindset with you?
Yes.
Wow. Was he a guy that he felt bad for you for going through it, or no, he just said, man up, take the responsibility? Like, what approach did he take with you?
I think deep down he probably felt bad, but no, definitely man up. You got yourself into this. You're going to have to get yourself out of it. You have 4 daughters, and, dig deep and do what you have to do.
Interesting. So how does one go about becoming a referee in the NBA? I mean, obviously, you don't have a lot of referees. Like, this isn't an option where you got 200 refs reffing a game. It's typically the same faces for a decade, 2 decades. Some even 30 years are refereeing, right, or more. So how does one become a referee?
I was fortunate that the area I was from was a hotbed for referees, whether it was college referees or even NBA referees. We had Joe Crawford, we had Tom Washington, Steve Javie. So, we had a lot of people that, came from our area. So, it was
Why is that, though? Why from there?
I think what happened is people saw, and these people were accessible in the community, and you thought to yourself, wow, if he did it, I could probably do it.
Because I guess I'm asking a question. You went to school, same school that Ed Malloy, Crawford went to?
Joe Crawford, Malloy, Mike Callahan.
I mean, that's so you know how you say Silicon Valley, all the technology companies come out of. Why refereeing there? I mean, there's refereeing going on everywhere. Is one guy made it and he started making money so people followed his footsteps? What was the reasoning for that?
I think, Crawford was a big guy in our area. He was accessible in the community. It's not like, he was felt like he was somebody special. He gave back to the younger referees and would go to a park where you were reffing, a men's league game, and he'd show up and he'd start giving you pointers. So he passed it down to a lot of people in that area. And it was great basketball in the Philadelphia area, so you were always refereeing, the good athletes. So you learned a lot quicker than maybe somebody that was refereeing somewhere else. So you got used to the bigger guys and the hard play. And when you got in front of those people that you were looking to impress, you were ready for it.
So what was your break? I mean, I know you went to Villanova for school yourself, right? And then you were refereeing some college games, but when was your break when you all of a sudden got the offer to go into the NBA?
What happened for me was I was lucky because my father was a Final Four official, did the Final Four for several years, so my last name was recognized in the officiating community. So when I started to do it, I got a lot of breaks, probably a lot sooner than a lot of other people did. So it was a training process and a training program, and I took it very seriously, and I was fortunate that I made it to the NBA. What
was your first game? First game you reffed, do you remember that?
I do. It was in Indiana, and they were playing Houston.
Tonight, Mahalik, Reichelt, and Donaghy. And the Rockets win the tip.
Indiana will be Reggie Miller, Olajuwon era, so that's a good era.
Yeah. Larry Brown coaching, tough coach.
1,000 wins, yeah.
Yeah, and at the end of the game, Reggie Miller makes a move, and he's always trying to draw contact and jumped into somebody. And I called an offensive foul.
Miller over Olajuwon Fowler. They're going to call an offensive foul on Reggie Miller. Oh, boy, that took a lot of guts by that young official. And, boy, look at the debris come out on the court.
And the place went nuts, threw stuff on the court. Game couldn't be played for about 20 minutes. And that was my first game. And you know how you always go back to your hotel room and you watch SportsCenter, there's my picture. And it was funny because I don't know who did it. Nobody would admit it, but I had football helmets sent to my house from the other referees, saying you're probably going to need this for the rest of your career. So that was my first game, and it was something I always remember.
What was that reaction? I mean, your dad being a referee, did he call you saying, "What are you doing? That was a good call"? Was that what did you hear?
Well, I'll never forget. Daryl Garrettson was at the game, and as we walked off the floor and went into the locker room, he said, "We're going to find out real quick if you're going to make it in this league, because that call better be right." And he backed me up and supported me, and so did Rod Thorne with the call. Looking back, probably would have been the easier call to make, would have been just to put Reggie to the line.
Yeah.
It was one of those things that could have went either way, but I called the offensive foul.
What did your dad tell you? Did he tell you anything when he saw you on ESPN or no?
No, I mean, my dad would watch the games and, give me pointers here and there, but the college game was really much different than the NBA game. It wasn't, in college you refereed the rules as they were written in the rule book. In the NBA, you refereed personalities and names on the front and the back of the jersey. So
Wow.
it was a different game.
Interesting. Complete different game.
Yes.
You actually were one of the three referees of the night when the Pacers against the Pistons fight took place.
Right.
What happened? I mean, obviously everybody knows what happened with Ben Wallace and Ron Artest, but how did it get crazy all of a sudden? And I think you guys had to stop the entire game and send everybody home.
Yeah, it was just bad blood, I think, from previous games, and the game was pretty much decided and over. And during a dead ball after a free throw, they start pushing each other, and the next thing you know, we're trying to straighten things out, and Artest goes over and sits by the table, and somebody throws a beer on him, and then all hell breaks loose. So standing in the middle of that with chairs flying and Jermaine O'Neal squared up with a guy and punched him, and if there wasn't so much water and beer on the floor, he lost his back foot. And I think if he didn't lose his back foot, I think that kid would be dead, because there's a guy with a lot of power just punching somebody as hard as he could. So it was definitely scary.
What made it get to the point where we have to call the game? We have to send. What was the tipping point?
There was just too many fights going on in the stands. The floor was completely soaked with things.
Who called the shots to say the game is called?
Ron Garrettson, who was the crew chief at that time, said that there's no way we can play this game. We got to get out of here. Someone's going to get seriously hurt. And everything was just flying all over the place. So we just ran for cover.
When's the last time that ever happened in the NBA?
I don't think it ever happened.
I don't think. I mean, I was researching how many times has the game been called. I don't think it's. I mean, in baseball, games get called for rain.
Right.
But you get a game called for this.
Yeah, it was definitely scary. Plus, Rashid was on the floor. I was afraid he was going to take a swing at me.
Oh my God! And obviously Ben's a big boy. Artest is a big boy. All the tough guys were all in that game.
I grabbed Ron Artest by the jersey, and he drugged me like I was just an ant right up into the stand. So it was like I wasn't even on his back. Yeah.
It cost him how many games? 68 games? Was
the rest of the year.
And then Steven Jackson said something like that game cost him $3.8 million, some big number.
Right.
With the fights that broke out in the stands. But I think the last time I saw something like that take place was in 96, 95 season when Vernon Maxwell ran up 16 rows and Ori pulled him back. I don't know if you remember that game or not.
I do.
Yeah, this was a long time ago. I'm like, what is Vernon Maxwell doing? Ori pulled him out and said, listen, we got to get out of here. I had never seen it that bad with fans.
Right.
But it was an interesting one. Okay, so as you're going through and you're reffing and you're doing what you're doing, all these different personalities, who were some of the toughest guys to ref because they talk so much smack to you?
You got to go back to Gary Payton. Reggie Miller was tough at times because he always was trying to draw contact. You didn't know if he was causing it or if the defender was calling it. Karl Malone and, of course, Rasheed Wallace was one of those guys that, was always bickering back and forth with the referees.
I guess the question I would ask is, the level of difficulty on you, because you watch the games and you see who talks a lot to the refs and who doesn't, right? Mm-hmm. Who talked a lot to you that brought so much pressure to you? Meaning you're playing a game, today you're going to be facing off with Kobe, Jordan, Shaq, Malone, Olajuwon, all these big personalities. Who did you know was demanding to never miss a call on him out of everybody?
Rasheed, because even if you were right sometimes, he'd tell you were wrong. So he was one of the toughest guys to referee because it was just relentless. No matter what, you knew it was going to be a headache the entire 48 minutes.
Do you have a story with Wallace?
I read about it in the book about he's got 25 points and they win by 30, and at the end of the game he takes the ball and was upset with the call and bounced at the other referee who was walking away and hit him in the back. And I called a technical foul on him, and he really didn't say much at that point, but he was really upset, and he waited for me out in the parking lot. And
he waited for you in the parking lot?
Yeah, jumped out from behind a pole and literally wanted to fist fight me. So it took about 10 people to hold him back, but he really wanted to kill me.
Like to the point of wanting to really hit you?
Yeah, squared up. Fist in the air, I'm going to kick your ass, you son of a bitch type, screaming.
What was your reaction?
My reaction was to stand there and act like I wasn't scared, but I was, definitely terrified.
Yeah, he's what? He's 6'11". He's
6'11", long, lengthy, and I'm sure he's been in a couple scraps in his day.
I'm sure he has. Yeah, he would lead the league in technical fouls, I think, every year, 17, 21,
Right.
16.
Grew up in Philadelphia himself.
He's
so,
also a Philly guy.
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know he grew up there. So you refed for Mike, right, when he was at his peak, and you refed with Kobe, right? Who was more demanding?
You know, I think with the referees, they came at you two different ways. I think Michael came at you in a way that was, more professional. He would let you know that, you owed him one, or he felt like you missed a call.
How would he do that to you? Verbally?
Verbally.
Or?
He'd come up to you at a dead ball, or, at a free throw, and come over to you and just, whisper to you, or, let you know, I got hit down there. What's going on? Why aren't you making this call tonight? And plant the seed in your mind that, when he goes to the basket and he misses a shot, it's not because he missed a shot. It's because he was fouled.
Would he berate you and belittle you, or that wasn't his
No,
style?
he was never really like that.
Okay.
He was, pretty professional when he went after the referees.
Interesting. How about Kobe?
Kobe, he was a little more adamant, a little bit more cocky about it, a little bit with the aspect that I'm deserving of it. He knew he was the best player in the game at that time, and he wanted that treatment that Jordan got for so many years. And he let you know when he felt he wasn't getting it.
Did he end up getting his ways, or?
Oh, absolutely. I'll never forget that, there was a game, and this is one of the games where I passed information along to people I shouldn't have. But Phil Jackson sent a tape into the league office, and one of the group supervisors came in and told the referees that they sent a tape in that said, here's 25 plays in the last 3 games that Kobe was fouled on, and the referees missed the call. They did different things to plant seeds in the NBA office and the referee's mind to, if they felt that their star player wasn't getting the treatment that they deserved.
How often does that happen? Is that pretty common?
Very common.
For coaches and owners to send videos into home office for you guys to see?
Not for the referees to see,
No, for
but
the
for the league
association to
office to
see,
see,
yeah.
and then hopefully it's going to be passed down. I don't think the league office wanted it passed down in the manner that it was passed down to us, before a game like that. But that's planting a seed in our heads to make sure we don't miss a play going to the basket with Kobe. And I knew that he was probably going to go to the line 20 times that night and probably have 30 points.
Is that protocol? Is that typical protocol? Like, it's not frowned upon? If I'm Phil, if I'm Popovich, if I'm Riley, if I'm whoever, and I'm not happy about the way the game was reffed, and I take these 3 plays and I record them and I moderate it and I send it in, that's very much protocol?
Yeah, that's done all the time.
That's done all the
especially
time.
during the playoffs.
Did anybody do more than others?
I think Mark Cuban really started to go overboard with that and bombard the league office with plays and situations where he felt his team was getting screwed.
I noticed one thing you said about Mark is that most of the time his complaints, he was right. So he wasn't just a business guy that didn't know the game and he wasn't savvy. He actually was a business guy who understood the game, and when he would get upset about a missed call, most of the time he was right. Is that what your experience was with him?
Definitely. I mean, I personally, I liked him. I would always say hi to him. Most of the referees hated his guts because they felt that our job was made harder because of all the complaints that he did, which made us have to break more tape down and file more reports based on the fact that they wanted us to monitor, our calls more. And it was because he was sending stuff into the league office and he was asking, why don't the referees do this? Where's the breakdown from the referees on what's a correct call and what's an incorrect call?
Was there a trend with what he wasn't happy with, or no? Was there like a specific series of 3 things, this travel you didn't call, or this offensive foul you don't call? Are we going to call the kicks with Miller? Is there any trend yet with things he wasn't happy with?
Mark's biggest gripe was, and he was 100% right, is that there was so much subjectivity and the rules weren't being enforced as they were written in the rule book. So,
Got it.
And personalities came into play. So one night somebody may call, roughhouse play in the post, and then
Yeah.
the next crew will come in and they're going to let it go. He wanted more of a consistent whistle from the group of referees rather than having different crews officiate different ways.
I remember one time I read somewhere saying that they asked David Stern, what does the ideal finals look like? And he said Lakers versus the Lakers, right? He was a big
Right.
Laker guy, although later on he kind of stopped the Chris Paul trade for Pau Gasol that one year, if you remember what happened with that year. Was there a feeling of the commissioner favors 2 or 3 teams and the rest of us are just owners. You're not following the rule book. Is that where the frustration was coming from?
Yeah, I think so. Like you said, when he makes a comment that the best ratings would be the Lakers versus the Lakers, the referees see that. And the referees are paid based on advancement from the first round to the second round, the third round to the finals. And they know that you're being graded on certain things. So, Bavetta would say he was the NBA's go-to guy. He was put on game sixes to make game sevens. And,
He said that.
Said that several times. And a lot of times he was, on a game six that helped the Lakers advance to a game seven. Or, it was a situation where Portland should have won a series. The Lakers won because of a lot of the calls that he made. The famous Sacramento game six where, things happened at the end of the game that just seemed flat out backwards.
For game seven, Leonard called for the offensive foul.
And this is a terrible call.
And now Bob Delaney with the whistle and the foul on Divac.
What is happening here?
And here's Christie on the foul once again.
Kobe Bryant ran over Mike Bibby. Oh, an elbow.
Yes. And the Lakers wondering what is going on. This, in effect, icing. Try to gather themselves. This Western Conference final series is even.
That game seven in Sacramento, his mindset was, it's another game, it's a lot more revenue, and game sevens are great for the league, and let the game seven, let the best team win. Of course, LA goes into Sacramento and upsets them. That's a year that, Sacramento probably should have had a ring on their finger.
I clearly remember this. I remember where I was at. Every game I watched, I could tell you exactly where I was at. Who was ref in game six? I know you were. Who else was in that game?
No, that's a bit of misconception. It was Bob Delaney, Ted Bernhardt, and Dick Bavetta were refereeing that game six. So I think people get Delaney and Donaghy confused a little bit.
And that's the game where in the fourth quarter, I think Lakers shot 27 free throws versus, the Kings shot 10 free throws, or 7 for 9, I wanted to be exact, and Lakers shot 27, which is insane to shoot 27 free throws in the fourth quarter. And you see the whole play that happens with from the Chris Webber offensive foul. You know which one I'm talking about.
Sure.
He turns, they call the offensive foul, and then a series of fouls that made no sense, absolutely made no sense, and then they lose the game. So when that happens, how much of that is association coming down, saying we need a 7 for the Lakers to go to game 7 versus Nets, Kings? I'd rather have Lakers, Nets than have, the Kings. How much is it from the association, and how much is it just pure business?
Well, nobody really ever comes down and says, fix this game, or we need the Lakers for ratings. But what they do is they'll show you plays that happen early on in the series and show you things to concentrate on. It might be a player in the post is too physical. He may be traveling before he makes his move, and they'll show you these plays, and they were always for the team that was down in the series to benefit them.
Got it.
So they'd show you 10 plays, and 8 of them were going to help the team that was down in the series, and they'd throw 2 in just to not make it so obvious.
Did the same refs ref game 7 or no?
No.
Is that a protocol?
What happens is, when you're in the playoffs, you'll referee game 1 and maybe a game 4 or a game 7. So you're never going to ref, the whole series, or you're going to be left out a couple games before.
But there's an incentive for it to go game 7, so I can get another game, right? Do you get paid
absolutely.
per game, or is it you get paid per game, or it's just
per
a set?
round? But we always helped all the games went 7 games because it was more assignments for the referees.
So the more games, you guys make more money. The more
Sure.
games it is.
Right, you'll get paid per round, but there's extra bonus money for the airlines. You flew. They gave
that's
you
like
$2,500, $3,000 for an airline ticket, and yet you were flying on a free ticket.
Maybe that's an issue. Maybe the comp is structured in a way for me to have an incentive to drag the series versus not emotionally being connected with it on my pocket, so I'm not tempted to do something. Do you think sometimes the way the comp structure is built for refs, you are sitting here reffing these guys that are making 20, 30, 40 million a year, you're making 275, and you're like, wait a minute. This is insanity. I'm on the same floor as you. I know I'm the ref, but I'm only making this much money. Do you think sometimes that leads to a little bit of a temptation, or no?
I think it does. I think we were paid very well. The salary was good, and so was the extra benefits of the airline money and the per diem money. So the top referees were making well over $400,000 a year when you talk about refereeing into the NBA Finals.
What is it today? Is that the same number, or?
I don't know if it's going up from there or not, but I'm sure it's got to be somewhat the same or even better.
400,000. Interesting to be making 400,000. So Bavetta was reffing that game, Kings Lakers. Now I'm a diehard Laker fan, so I'm kind of glad the way it turned out because that was a three-peat year for them. But still,
Right.
I want a real game. I want proper officiating as a fan because you want to know who's really winning. You don't want to see somebody else have an influence. Didn't Danny Crawford go to MJ's camp, the flight school that he had, and they spoke about Bavetta? What happened there? Because it seems like Jordan had some issues with Bavetta as well. Or was it Bavetta or was it a different referee he was talking about?
No, it was Bavetta. I think, what happens is every referee has players they like and dislike. And every player, when they walk out onto the floor, looks at the referees and knows whether they're going to get the benefit of a whistle or not. And Jordan felt that he didn't get the benefit from Bavetta at times. So, he talked about it with Danny Crawford, who was working his summer basketball camp and getting money. So where Bavetta may not be giving Jordan the benefit of the calls, I can guarantee you Danny Crawford was, because he was working that summer basketball camp getting paid.
Got it.
Just like when Bennett Salvatore had Jordan's sneakers in his restaurant autographed up on the wall. I can guarantee you that, he got the benefit of the calls when Salvatore was on the floor. So every referee,
Very interesting.
yeah, every referee had their, likes and dislikes, with a player and a coach.
So the way I see it when I look at it from the outside is, just like some of these companies nowadays have lobbyists, you see Amazon moving a part of their headquarters close to D.C. and being right next to, Virginia, because that's where the politicians and the lawmakers are. Was there a lot of that going on with players and refs as well? Like, listen, we got to win this ref over, we got to win that ref over. Was there some that played that strategy a lot, or was it an unspoken
absolutely.
rule?
Relationships, both positive and negative, existed in the NBA with the referees and the players, referees and the coaches, and the referees and owners. Joe Crawford, for example, hated Cuban. I wrote a story in the book about him turning to Mark Cuban and literally putting his hands down his pants and playing with his junk, and taunting Cuban. He did it, many times.
You're serious?
Yeah, to the point where Cuban had a camera focus on Crawford and sent the tape into the league office.
Unbelievable.
The top guys hated Mark because they felt like he changed the structure of what we needed to do after the game with breaking down tape and
Were Danny and Joey friends?
buddies.
So they are buddies.
Oh, yeah.
So who Joey doesn't like, Danny doesn't like, that they were so in cahoots that if you were bad with one, you were bad with the other?
For the most part, they were very good friends. And the bottom line is a lot of people, like I said, didn't like Mark because of the fact that they felt he added to our workload. A lot of guys like to go out to the bars after the game and do their thing. When Mark came in, it was after the game, we were in the locker room or a hotel room for 2 hours, breaking down the tape and sending reports in.
Let me ask you, so in the business world, a lot of companies run their priorities in different way. For instance, there are some companies in Silicon Valley that number one is engineer. You don't mess with engineers. You give them whatever they want, spa treatment, good treatment, leave them alone. They're going to have attitude sometimes. They're going to be pissed off sometimes. Do not mess with our best engineers, right? When you look at the NBA at the top, what is the level of priority who they're loyal to? If you have owners, if you have players, if you have fans, if you have referees, if you have executives, if Mark is complaining to the association about Joey and Danny, from my standpoint, I'm like, wait a minute, he's one of your 30 owners. That's a priority. How did the association treat the most important client at the top?
They bowed down to him. I mean, the referees were a necessary evil. If they could have these games played without...
Even the association saw you guys as evil?
Absolutely. There was always...
How come you guys never got fired, though?
At times they did let some referees go.
Who got fired? Any big names that got fired?
Never a big name that got fired. It was always, recently that, they paid Eli Rowe $350,000 to kind of walk away from the game.
Is he a top 10 ref in the game?
No, never anyone like that would
Well,
ever
that's
be
what I'm
fired.
talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, was
Well,
the NBA...
look what Joey did with Tim Duncan.
And another technical foul. And this is when he's thrown Duncan out of the game. That's the second technical, which is an automatic ejection. Maybe Crawford felt he was showing him up by constantly laughing.
That was pathetic.
And everyone thought he wasn't coming back. And, he ended up coming back, and everybody joked around that, he had pictures with David Stern with farm animals somewhere because they couldn't understand the fact that David Stern brought him back again after this being another serious problem that he had on the floor, after, warning after warning after warning, and they still brought him back.
So who is their priority? Who is the NBA's priority to protect? Is
Definitely
it
the
players,
players.
first? Okay, players first.
Absolutely. That's the product. So
That's the product. So number one is players. Who would you say is two? Fans or NBA owners?
I think it would be the players, the owners, and then the fans. I mean, you saw recently Westbrook in Utah. I don't know if you saw.
$25,000, and the fans got permanently banned.
Why is that fan being permanently banned? That the fan didn't curse? You know, what did that fan do that you're going to permanently ban him? Same with Dolan in New York. The guy said sell the team, and now he's not allowed back to watch a game.
What do you think about that?
I think it's terrible. You're there to have fun, scream and cheer, whether it's positive or negative. I found it was absurd that they said that these fans couldn't come back.
You think that decision is made with front office, meaning did Utah's owner call front office and say, what should we do? And the NBA said, Adam said, you better permanently ban the fan from the game? Or do you think it's the team that made the decision without the enforcement of the association?
I think it's the team that makes those individual
interesting.
decisions.
Got it. So it's left to Utah to make that decision.
Yes, that's I believe it's.
So it's kind of like how the government is ran. You leave the states to run it the way they want. Federal makes a decision, and the states make the decisions the way they want. Interesting. And you don't agree that was the right decision?
I don't. I mean, I could see if somebody screamed or cursed or said something, offensive with kids and women around. But to me, they just, they voiced an opinion. I don't understand why, that was such a.
Well, did you hear what Westbrook said that they said to him? And
no,
you think
no, I believe that wasn't the case because they interviewed the guy and they had the tape.
Don't they have enough audio to be able to hear what the fans said? I mean, you should be able to hear all this stuff. It's not like you can't investigate that and figure out what the fans were saying.
You'd be shocked, but
you
my
got 20 people around them to interview and say, what did they say?
They have cameras up in the scoreboard that they can roll back things, and if somebody throws something from a seat, they can zero in and find out who threw it. So there's cameras and audio everywhere, so I would think that they could definitely determine what was said.
So when it comes down to Danny Crawford, Joey Crawford, and an owner like Cuban, what control do owners have to say who gets to ref? Nothing, right? It's all association assigning who refs what game. And the owners have no say for who refs any game.
Supposedly they have no say, but there was two guys that were released a couple of years ago, Kevin Fair and Phil Robinson. And, supposedly Mark Cuban had a lot to do with that. They were in the league 15, 16, 17 years, weren't refereeing in the playoffs. And, he voiced his opinion. Why are we paying somebody so much money when they're not talented enough to be so they ended up getting rid of him.
I'm sorry. I mean, if I am Adam Silver or David Stern, who would you say in the NBA is as involved as an owner as Mark Cuban is? Honestly. Here's what I mean by it. He's owned the Mavs since what? I don't know, 92, 93, 90. I don't know the exact year. I want to say 92, I think, when he bought them, give or take, when he bought the Mavs. So after he purchases the Mavs, how many NBA owners do you think have attended their team games as many as Mark Cuban has? How many NBA owners? I don't think anybody.
No, but I think they started to, because once he started to do it.
But that's my point. What I'm trying to say is if I'm the association, I want more Cuban owners. I want owners that are as involved as him. I don't want a Dolan. I want a Cuban because he cares. That's why he's involved emotionally to it. And so a Mark Cuban, believe it or not, recruits more guys like me to one day want to own a team where Dolan doesn't. Mark Cuban's a guy that says, you know what? Hey, one day I'd like to own a team like Mark. Hey, one day I'd like to own a team. Like maybe Mark said, one day I want to be as a great owner as Jerry Buss, because Jerry Buss was the best owner in the history of NBA. 33 seasons, you win 10 championships, 10 out of 30. That's a pretty solid run rate you have, and now your daughter's running it. Maybe a different story with Jim and Jeannie. But when I see that, I'm like, maybe you ought to listen when a couple of these referees. So do you think refs should get fired if you notice a trend that they're taking sides? Like, do you think refs ought to be fired and not be protected by union, even the best ones?
I think a ref should be fired if his percentages are low and they're tracking every call every referee makes. And they're saying that, every referee has a percentage attached to their name.
Yeah.
So they should get rid of the bottom 5% every year and bring in somebody else, because the rules are clear cut. They're in black and white. They give you tape. They show you what to call, and they put it out there for you. And if you're not you're not doing the job, or if you have a sales rep that's not selling the product, how long are you going to keep that, sales rep? You're going to get rid of them, and that's what they should do with the referees. If they're not doing their job, they should be released.
Yeah, I mean, if you want me to compete in a marketplace and you're doing it based on a rule book, we're going to enforce the rule book.
Right.
And the part that gets frustrating is when you have an edge over me because you got 7 referees that are on your side and they're manipulating the game, they control the game, and they hate me because I'm a vocal owner because I show up and I care about my business, and you're going to throw me under the bus like a Joey Crawford, 1 out of 15. Joey or Danny? I think it's Danny's the one that's
Right.
1 out of 15 playoffs.
Right.
Mavs record. I don't know. It turns me off as an owner knowing because whoever buys a sports team has gone through capitalism, period. Or somebody in their family made the money. Like Dolan, his family made the money, he got the money. But they have gone through the marketplace. And in a marketplace, you play with the rules. And when you play with the rules, if the rules are not fair, you're going to compete. You have to figure out what you can do and pivot and all this other stuff. So when you go into a league that there's additional games and manipulation, it's a little bit frustrating for an owner. So I can
because
fully understand
you
where he's
go
coming
into
from.
it and you want to get the best coach. You want to
Yeah.
get the best GM to build your team based on the rules, on how they're
Yeah.
written in the rule book, and that at times just isn't something that's happening.
How many times do you see coaches being fired after having 1 bad season, 2 bad seasons? They're gone. First person you fire is who? The coach. It's
Right.
an easy person to blame. This guy's stuck with Carlisle for how many years now? A long time.
Right.
A long time. And there's been some times where he could have made the decision because everybody said he should get rid of him, change it up, bring somebody else. And you kind of see the discipline of the fact that he sticks with people. He's a great owner. Anyway, that's a complete different conversation. You know, when did it happen for you, the whole story of you all of a sudden saying, look, there's a gambling opportunity here. What was that process when you got introduced to the Sheep, Batista, and maybe walk us through that part?
You know, what happened was I love to golf, so I'm golfing at country clubs, starting to play in big money golf matches. After golf matches, jumping in the car and heading to a casino, sitting at a blackjack table. The excitement's there with all your buddies from the country club, and I just became a situation for me where I loved it. I was playing cards in my basement. I had a big poker table in the basement, and every day of my life I was, golfing. I was playing cards. I was betting on games, college football, college basketball, and it just escalated to, my one buddy having the Philadelphia Daily News with him, asking me to pick a couple games for him in the NBA. I had just come from home, and I looked at the referee list of who was refereeing the games. I saw a couple of the guys somewhere. Maybe it was, an example that you were using that Danny Crawford had a problem with the Mavs, and I rattled off 3 games to him real quick based on who was refereeing, and I went 3-0. And he calls me up the next day and he goes, "Man, was it that easy?" And I was like, "Yeah," and not thinking really much about it. And then it just kind of snowballed. We started betting on NBA games, and then, when things happened, like the thing with Kobe Bryant, and I knew he was going to start going to the line because they were complaining with the league office, and the referees were being told that these plays were being missed, that, I started passing along information like that to him when I was officiating some of the games. So, I got up to a line, and then I just jumped over it, and I shouldn't have been doing it.
And when you did, was it the moment, did you know like the point of no return, like you knew it was like, I am too deep? Was it the first time we were like, I'm too deep, or no, you didn't think you were too deep
No,
yet?
I didn't think I was too deep. Then it got to the point where, I was doing it, and I said to my buddy, listen, we got to stop this. This isn't right. And we stopped. Then we just floated back into doing it, and then we stopped for good. And what I didn't know was that this guy was passing this information along to the Sheep and to another guy that was associated with big gamblers, and they were making millions of dollars on these games. So when we stopped doing it, and the Sheep and all his people weren't getting the plays anymore, I went into Philadelphia for a game, and Tommy Martino, who was a high school buddy of mine, called me up and said, "Hey, listen, I'm going to come down and see you." And they came down and they picked me up, and in the car was James Batista. And he told me that he was getting the plays for years from Jack and Cannon, and they were making millions of dollars on it, and that he needed to continue to get those plays. And if not, he was going to expose me to the NBA or have somebody visit my wife or kids in Florida. And it was
Flat out.
flat out. So it was something that we set it up, and I was to give Martino the plays, and Martino relayed them to Batista. And they were making millions of dollars, and it was heard over a Gambino wiretap.
How did you feel in that moment when that statement was made? Like, what was your immediate reaction, or was there an immediate?
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
Were you startled?
Sick, because I'm screwed. I can't all of a sudden call somebody up and say, hey, listen, this is what I've been doing for the last 3 years. Can you just let me go and I won't do it anymore and keep my job? I knew I was screwed. Either way, I was done. I was hoping at the end of the basketball season, after giving them the picks, that it was going to be over and we were never going to do it again. But, I was highly mistaken. They were never going to, as the FBI agents say, release the golden goose. You're, putting too many, dollars in their pockets for them to just stop.
So now this continues post that statement for how long? So he makes that statement to you, if you don't continue,
right. It
we're
was,
going to have to pay a
I
visit.
believe it was December 22nd, and it went on for the next 3 or 4 months to where they were really banging the games, and the lines were going from 10 points up to 14 or 15 points because they were just betting millions and millions of dollars on it. And the FBI agent said normally they wouldn't touch a gambling case, but it was putting so much money into the coffers of the crime families that that's why they got involved.
This is documented or off the meaning? Is it bookies or is it online, gambling, Vegas type of stuff? How were they doing it for it not to be tracked or to be tracked?
I think they were doing it everywhere. I think Batista was so strung out on drugs and owed so many people so much money that he was getting down whoever would take his action. So I think that they were doing it everywhere.
Even documented, meaning
Yes.
it doesn't matter if it was Vegas, bookies,
Right.
I'm going through everybody.
And the word on the street now is that the people actually in Vegas, knew that was going on, and they were piggybacking on the bets also. So the red flags were going up, but they were just ignoring them on purpose because they were also making money.
Had he already dropped your name where he had credibility with the bets he was making, or no?
No, not at that point. I think that it was wanted to keep it a secret, not expose it, and then maximize it to the best that you could do. I think as he got more strung out on drugs and he started losing money, betting on other things, the word out now is that he lost $7 million of people's money, and they were coming after him. And he said, "Whoa, wait a minute! I got a golden goose, and his name's Tim Donaghy. So
Then he
back
gave
off.
it up.
I'm going to get you your money back. Just be patient."
Got it. What was the biggest bet they were making? Did you know the numbers? Were they telling you or not really?
No, they weren't telling me,
Okay.
but the agent said they were betting millions of dollars a game.
What were you making per victory?
I was getting $2,000 a game that won
Per cash.
cash.
And when it was happening where you're like, oh my gosh, this is an additional source of income. I mean, I can really double down with this.
Sure, because I always like to have a big wad of money in my pocket to hit the casinos, to golf with, standing over a putt. Sometimes we were betting $500, $1,000. You're going to make that putt. I mean, it was just out of control, but I loved it. I loved the excitement of it.
So what role did Jack play? Was Jack pre the sheep, or was he post?
No, Jack was pre the sheep, and Jack was just my good buddy, great guy.
He
And
was what, 6'5"? He played or something
played
like
at
that.
St. Joe's, great athlete, and a super guy, and great family guy, and it just was a situation where he was to put the bets in and keep my name out of it. But what was happening is the guy that he was putting the bets in was taking that information and knowing that we were buddies and using that information and passing along to people.
Got it. When's the last time you spoke to Jimmy?
Jimmy Batista?
Yeah.
He owes me money for restitution that I paid. So from time to time, I have to send him a text message that says, where's the check? So,
Seriously?
Yeah.
And so there's a relationship.
It's somewhat of a relationship, or an email that I'll have to send to his attorney and him. He's not a friend of mine in any way, shape, or form. But due to the fact that he owes me that money, there's some conversation from time to time.
What is this story about Shmaga? You guys use this phrase Shmaga like a kid from school, and what was that all about? The code?
Yeah, Shmaga was it was a kid from Holy Cross that was mentally and physically handicapped, and the Martino family, Tommy, really cared for this kid. He really didn't have any family members, and they took him in as if he was their own son for years. And we all met him, we all hung out with him, we'd take him out to eat, and he was just kind of a part of our family, so to speak, And the Martinos were, gracious in everything that they did for that kid. And we said that when we needed a name for a game where it was just a can't lose situation, and I think Tommy said, well, let's call it a Schmaga, because that was Joey's nickname, Schmaga. So that's what that was.
That meant double or triple the bet that you're making.
Anything you could do.
Yeah. And based on what I hear about Tommy was what, 5'4", but he was great with the ladies. People liked him. They respected him. He was strong.
He'd be pissed off if he heard you say he's 5'5".
He's 5'5". My apologies, Tommy, if you're watching this. Tommy, I heard good things for what I've heard from what people said about you.
He was a good-looking kid, a very likable kid, and
he walked like he's 7 feet tall.
Yeah,
he had swagger.
Every girl loved him. He was funny as could be. I think we talked about it earlier. His cousin Paulie Martino, a venture capitalist who has a lot of money, is doing a film based on his life called Inside Game, and I think I haven't seen it yet. I'm going to see it next week, but I think it's like a cross between Goodfellas and The Hangover. So
get out of here. So they're going to highlight the part about refereeing as well?
I think they're definitely going to touch on that, but I think it's mostly, like I said, I haven't seen it yet about him, and he was a funny kid, so I think it'd probably be a funny movie. Are
you participating in, are they bringing you as a consultant to do anything with it?
I may, take a look at it and make the decision after that and help them with some marketing on it.
It's interesting, when you grow up in different cities, every city has its own culture, every city. I mean, I grew up I lived in Tehran 10 years, right? It's a different culture. When I explain to people what it's like growing up in Tehran, and people say, come on, are you out of your mind? Are you freaking kidding me? I don't believe that. That's Tehran. I lived in Germany in a city called Erlangen, right outside of Nuremberg. It was a refugee camp. So the culture growing up, there's a complete different thing. You see different things. I grew up in Glendale, California, which is like the capital of Armenians around the world. If you live in Glendale, there's more Armenians in Glendale than anywhere else except for Armenia. So every city has its own culture. I've lived in Kentucky, Tennessee, all over the place. What is it like, the culture of Philadelphia in sports? Because, almost everybody I talk to that's from Philadelphia, when it comes down to sports, they talk about it like it's religion. I would put Philadelphia first. I'd put Boston 2, New York 3 is the way I put. What makes Philadelphia this special when it comes down to sports?
Just passionate with their sports teams. It's a situation where Sunday at 1 o'clock, everyone's in front of the TV waiting for the Eagles to come on. And I'll never forget, I was dating a girl one time that was, not really a big sports fan, and I'm at her house 1 o'clock, and I'm like, where's your dad? Why aren't the Eagles, what's going on here? And it just was very rare that, you're not a big, passionate Eagles, Flyers, Phillies fan, and it comes down to it's what everybody revolves around. The city doing well with their sports teams.
One of the questions I want to get into is the part about being asked that you fixed the game, and you're saying you didn't fix the game. They're saying you fixed the game, and obviously there was an investigation done with the FBI. Phil Scalia, I want to say the last name. Scala, yeah, and some other names that were involved in it, and I want to hear your part. What is the difference between fixing and gambling? So you were convicted specifically for gambling, right? You were not convicted for anything to do with fixing the game.
Right. I think what the big misconception is people think that I was out there calling fouls on Shaq and Kobe and LeBron and putting them to the bench to where I was betting on the other team and winning. That wasn't the situation. The situation was I was taking information of what the league office wanted to be called in those games and who was going to be put at an advantage or a disadvantage, or relationships that existed with referees and owners or certain players. Like you said, there was a time where Danny Crawford was 1 in 15 when he was refereeing the Dallas Mavericks games. There were times where I knew Crawford was going to stick it to a certain team because he had problems with them. So with that information, that's what I did and used that information. It wasn't like I was going out using the whistle on a nightly basis to make sure, the bets won.
Okay, but you also say that most referees gamble in the NBA. Would you agree with that? Would you say that you made that statement?
Yes.
Most referees gamble in the NBA. Okay, when you say that, what are you saying? Are you saying like $1,000 games, $500 games, $5,000 games? What do you mean when you say they gamble?
What I meant by when they gamble is, David Stern made the famous comment when this story went down. I was a rogue referee. And
2007, yep.
Legal gambling will cost you your job because it was in our contract you couldn't bet, and illegal gambling will cost you your freedom. And he didn't realize at that time that, probably 55 out of 58 NBA referees gambled, whether it was on the golf course. We all went to the casinos, we went to the racetrack. We did, a lot of us gambled on football games, even amongst each other. So I think he really had to backtrack and realize that, what he said was wrong, but he couldn't fire 55 out of 58 referees because they gambled, even though that's what he said.
Let's look at a couple of the numbers, because I know based on what I see is the NBA investigated 17 games in the 06 season, I believe, right? And out of the 17 games, if I remember this correctly, only one came where you called 2 offensive fouls on Collins. I'm sure you know this because you read it yourself and you've seen it yourself. And then ESPN, the magazine, went and investigated 40 games of that season. And I think the breakdown on the 40 games is 10 was a blowout. And then 23 out of 30, the calls favored the people and the teams that you bet on, or you said that were going to win. So that's 23 out of 30 that favored the calls. 3 of them went against, and 4 was, it is what it is. But when you look at those rates, they came back with a number saying that's like 6,155 to 1, chances of that happening. And so ESPN Magazine's claim is, no, he did fix the game. He was pulling the calls in a direction where the people that were betting would favor them. What do you say to that when that number comes back? I mean, how do you process that yourself when you see that?
Well, first of all, I don't know that those numbers are true, but just let's say that they are for the argument's sake. The FBI and the NBA both did a investigation going through every tape. Trust me, if the prosecutors could have charged me with fixing games, they would have done it. They wanted me to go to jail for a long time.
Do you think so, though?
Absolutely.
Tell me why, though. Why do you say that? Because my brain goes to a different place.
Because when I was being questioned about it,
Yeah.
they asked me, a number of times. They were going over the tapes, and I think at the end of it, when they stood up in court and said that, a lot of my allegations didn't hold water in order to support the NBA, when I was saying that certain referees were doing certain things in playoff series, they said that the allegations didn't hold water. I just think if the prosecution had any say in it, and the NBA, that I would have went to jail for a long time. I think the FBI agents who did the investigation realized that I was telling the truth at every turn, and that's why Phil Scala wrote the foreword for the book.
You think David Stern wanted you to go to prison for life?
I think that he wanted me to definitely disappear, because I think that, when my attorney, John Lauro, filed a lot of the motions in court and started giving certain examples, it caused a lot of problems for the NBA. So I think at some point he realized that, I was going to start to talk.
Yeah, so I'm seeing it from a different standpoint, and help me process this and tell me, if you agree or disagree. The way I see it is, what happened with the NFL, when a movie came out regarding concussions with Will Smith. And then they showed data afterwards, numbers and families with household income above $150,000 started pushing their kids away from playing football because they don't want their kids to have concussion. This is really making sense. This is really taking place. If it did come out that you did fix the game, if it did, wouldn't that have hurt NBA's credibility and reputation if there is a referee that did fix the game? Wouldn't that kind of hurt David Stern?
Absolutely, because it's on his watch, and he's supposedly monitoring this whole thing. So, yeah, it would have been an embarrassment and a black eye.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then that would have hurt the game, fans, numbers, owners, volume, advertising. I mean, it would have hit me. Because at that time he was running an organization. He was saying, when you're running a company that's a $4 billion franchise, you have to look at the profits, the numbers. You have clients, you have customers, you have owners. So for me, it almost goes back to the situation where you're saying, Jordan would give autographed shoes to that one ref and he puts it in his restaurant, or such and such person has lobbying with the refs to build a relationship. Wouldn't a David Stern be lobbying at the top with people in the government to kind of, hey, let this one go. We'll control it from here. We don't want a lot of attention for this. The game is doing good. The league is doing good. Everyone benefits from this. Let's just make sure this guy goes to and does his time, 15 months, and we'll leave him alone. He leaves us alone. He can't come back to the league. We can't. Wouldn't there be a possibility of a conversation like that with Stern?
There was. In fact, John Lauro called the league office and said, hey, listen, we would like to come in and speak with you and go over, what Tim actually did. I wanted to help them and show the the cracks in their cement, so to speak, and they didn't entertain it. And then afterwards, he said a lot of things and took my retirement money away from me and did a lot of things with the restitution that made it difficult for me to survive.
Made it difficult for you to survive, but did it hurt the NBA brand? Because if I own a team, I'm competing against 20. How many NBA teams are there right now? Is it 30 or 31? It's something like that, right?
Right, yeah.
I'm competing against 30 other teams. Okay. But if I'm Stern, I'm competing with 3 other teams, which is who? MLB, NFL, NHL.
Right.
NHL is a niche product. It's a different kind of a sport, right? But I am competing against NFL, maybe not MLB because MLB is different as well. And I'm trying to make sure NBA becomes what? Number 1, right?
Sure.
So, and at that time, everybody knows what happened with baseball in the 90s with the strike and all this other stuff. And I don't know when I watch this. Like when I watch it saying, okay, from what you tell me, if I'm an attorney, if I'm a jury, if I'm a judge, if I'm whatever I'm doing, I'm sitting there saying, okay, if you're getting $2,000 a pop, if you call a couple calls here and there, you may say, Pat, I'm telling you, I didn't do it. Maybe emotionally you're vested under 23 out of 30 games. Let's say that's true. I definitely don't want that to be public if I'm Stern, because that's going to hurt the league. So then it makes me go back and look at it and say, well, if that is the case, how many of the owners are sitting around saying, look, and if this is happening, because right now look who's pissed off today this season, Paul George. You heard Paul George just came out. He didn't even stop. Here's a guy that could potentially win the MVP this season. Realistically, LeBron's out. Harden's probably not going to win it this year. Westbrook's probably not going to win it this year. Anthony Davis is definitely not going to win it. It's probably Giannis. He's not happy. LeBron's not happy. Steve Kerr's not happy. Let's say LeBron's typically not happy. He's the best. He can not be happy. He is who he is. But some of these complaints they're making, you're sitting there watching and saying, look, man, I mean, is there some of it going on? So my question for you would be, do you think there's any fixing of the game going on today with any of the referees? I know you're an outsider now looking at, you're not in the circle anymore. I'm sure none of these referees can talk to you because you're probably the anti-you-know-what. You better not be talking to, yourself or else. I would just assume most industries do it that way. If somebody's a former FBI guy that went, whatever rogue, you can't talk to that guy. Mm-hmm. Because if you do, you're going to lose your job with us because we don't trust you. You're talking to an outsider, loose lips. Let's just say if I'm thinking that. Do you think there's anybody fixing the game today?
I don't think they're fixing games, but I think there's so much subjectivity still in the game. I think there's situations where relationships are positive and negative, and I think it spills out onto the floor. Chris Paul and Scott Foster just got into it recently, and I think that when Foster has the opportunity, he's going to continue to stick it to him. So
is that okay, though?
It's okay because the league allows it to continue to happen.
So how do you regulate that? You know how NFL, here's what I like about what the NFL has done, okay? And you know where I'm going with this one. There's the some of the stuff that they have. You can go back through the red flag and, we're going to review this or we're going to do that and we're going to do that. Why can't they kind of go a little bit more into that? Is it because it's going to slow down the game? Is it going to lengthen the game?
I think that's where it's heading, and I think it has to be done. If you look at officiating in all the major sports, name me one hockey referee. Name me one, NFL back judge. You can't do it. The NBA is the only league that you can continually name the referees because there's always, they have to hire more referees and spread the games out so that the players don't see the same referees on a continuous basis.
Yeah, you lose credibility. Honestly, I can't stand watching boxing at all. You saw it again with Triple G, the first fight versus Canelo. Oh, this referee scored it 7, whatever the score was, 5. I don't know what the 4-8 or 5-7, the way they scored it. And you lose trust. I watch UFC because at least UFC, you know who's going to be winning it. There's some credibility, even though a big personality guy like Dana White is running it, which there's some politics involved with him because he's a power guy. You have to listen to the way he runs the show. He built an empire. I still trust the results of UFC way more than I do basketball. And even like for me, a question for you. I'm curious to know what you said about this because I saw you the other day. You were standing by the computer and TV and you were talking about what happened. I think it was a Dwayne Wade call or some game it was that you were saying. This one, it was a Miami game, I think it was. I don't know which one it was, but I just saw it. The Golden State Warriors, they're facing Cavs, okay? And it's the season where they went 73-9 and the whole Draymond Green situation that took place. When you watch that, okay, they call the foul. I get it. Let's say foul's there. Technical foul, fine. Do you think a one-game suspension is granted for something like that for Draymond? Like, why did they suspend him for a game in the finals?
I think it depends on who was up and down in the series. I think if Golden State would have been down in the series, there would have been no suspension. But if they're up in the series, there's a suspension. Why? Because it takes a good player away off the floor, and then allows for the series to go on a little bit further. It allows for Cleveland to win a game. I just think it's a situation where even Stu Jackson, who used to have Vandeweghe's job, would say when he went to suspend somebody, especially during the playoffs, David Stern would call him up screaming and yelling, and it all depend on what the situation was with the series at the time. So it was so much, subjectivity on what the circumstance was.
But that's too much politics. That is too much politics, and it questions the integrity of the game.
And that's why they're always going to have problems until they figure out a way.
How do you fix that, though? Because that's a four-peat. That's not a three-peat, and no one's done a four-peat in a long time since what, Celtics? I think the only team that a four-peat was what, the Celtics? So Golden State's building an empire. There's a big difference between a two-peat and a four-peat, and they don't even have a three-peat, depending on if they win this year, which they have a lot of locker room issues. So I have a problem with that.
I think you have to hire more referees, and I think every year you have to get rid of the ones that call percentages below par and have a standard, and that way the players and the fans and the owners will see that there's some turnover.
But
and
then if you made the decision, not referees, to give the one-game suspension, right? I mean, it's not
I think
like
that came from a way above him. I don't think that was his decision.
So Adam is the one that got him.
I think so. I think Stu Jackson came out and said when it gets to that point that the commissioner gets involved.
Yeah, that's disappointing. I mean, I don't know how you feel about that, but that's disappointing. Let's transition. I got some other questions, a complete different direction I want to go into with you. And I'm curious to know what you're going to say about this. So what do you think about steroids in sports or PED in sports? Like, GH, growth hormone, steroids in football, steroids in baseball. What do you think about steroids and additional things that people are using in sports?
I think it puts them at an unfair advantage, for the people that aren't doing it. So I think it's tough that you have to really regulate it to make sure that everyone's playing under the same, rules and field.
Do you think they should make it legal or no?
No, I think that you have to make it illegal because I think it sends a bad message to the kids. If you do this, which is probably hurting your lifespan, that, you're going to be able to end up like these guys. I think it just sends the wrong message.
Okay, so some of these guys are coming and saying, look, I'm playing football, man, I'm getting my ass kicked, and I'm being hit by a 330-pound person. I kind of need my body to be a little bit stronger. I need a little bit of GH to be able to handle this. You don't know what it's like to be hit head-on with a freaking helmet that can crush anybody's skull, and, this guy's on something, and I'm not, to be able to have that. So I ask this question because it leads me to a whole different thing. You think Canseco did the right thing by coming out and telling everybody's story about who was doing what and who was doing this? You think that was the right move on his end?
I think he had a story. I think he was, fed up with the way it was, the direction that it was heading, and he wanted to, come out and say his side of it because I think it was obvious that, he definitely was on steroids, and I think he admitted it. So with that, I think he just wanted to make sure everybody else knew what was going on.
Did it help baseball, you think?
I think it took a little bit of excitement out of the game because at that time, it was all those home runs were flying out of the park. So I think it it hurt it, but I think in the big scope of things, I think it helped the younger generation that they took that out of the game. I think that the league, to be honest with you, came up with a different way of trying to keep that excitement. And we all know they say that the balls are juiced now. So, you don't do the steroids because the ball is going to go out of the park now anyway. So, they came up with a different avenue to keep that excitement in there. So I think there's always going to be situations that fans are going to question, what's being done and how it's being done.
As a fan, as an outsider, I don't know if you're a baseball guy or not. I mean, you're an all sports guy. So did that do anything to you about the opinion of the game in baseball? Did you look at it and say, I trusted more, I trusted less, or did you I really don't give a shit?
No, it didn't matter to me either way.
Got it. So what do you think about Pete Rose? Does he belong in the Hall of Fame?
I do. I think he, belongs in the Hall of Fame. I think he should be judged for what he did on the field during his playing days. Obviously, he made a mistake. He's finally come to the point where, he said that he did what he did. And I think that he should be given that opportunity. I hope he does while he's still here, that, he makes it into the Hall of Fame because I think he's somebody that, deserves it, and I think it would really, change his life.
How many times has the NBA or have any owners reached out to you to want to hire you as a consultant or bring you in? I know this is a crazy idea, but has anybody from the NBA office, front office, or any sports team, I'm not looking for names, I'm not asking you to throw names here, I'm just asking, has anybody from the league ever reached out to you, considered to employ you?
No.
Never?
No.
Any NBA owners?
I had conversations with one owner early on, and unfortunately it fell through, and I thought it was going to be something that I was going to do, but it didn't work out.
If I am the NBA and I hired you as a consultant, what could you bring in value to the NBA? Would you be able to identify areas where the integrity of the game would be going higher? Would you be able to help them out? Or
Absolutely. You have to look at it from a experience and referee perspective of what referees are doing on the floor, who they're talking to during timeouts, before the game, who they're laughing with.
Yeah.
And all that from a perception-wise, other referees, will pick that up because they know maybe this guy's, getting in a position to try and get a call. Other players will look over and see, why is he talking to that guy and
Yeah.
he's not talking to me? An owner or a coach will look over the timeout and say, why is he talking to that guy and not talking to me? And then what happens after that series in the next couple times down the floor? Did they get a call? Do you go back to why he got that call? Because he had conversation with him? There's just a lot of things that you have to look at in regard to.
how about the other side? Would a sports team benefit from hiring you?
I think I could show them the mistakes that the referees are making or what they're calling so that they could go over that in practice in regard to prepare for certain referees and what they're calling, or look at the league office and see what they're telling the referees to call and make sure that their players are doing the things the right way and enforcing what the referees are being told to call it. So it changes from every given night. They have a web page and they're sending out plays to these referees and telling them to call these certain things.
How big of an impact could you make points-wise per game?
I think that, we talked about this at lunch. I think there's no doubt, if you know the tendencies of the referees and you know what they're calling, that there could be a difference of 2, 3, or 4 points if you are aware of not doing what they're going to call.
You take 4 points times 82 games, that's 328 points, something like that. That could cost you like 3, 4, 5 games. That could be 8 playoffs, 6th, 8 spot, 10 spot. I mean, we're not talking little numbers here. So my follow-up for you would be this. Would Adam Silver be okay if I, one of these sports owners, hired you as a consultant?
I think that there would be a problem. I think that early on I was going to have a job with one of the owners, and I think that he basically was told to stop talking to me. That's my personal opinion. I don't know for sure, but.
So do you know who Frank Abagnale is?
I do.
So what do you think about Frank's story?
Great story. I remember the movie with the FBI agents with the money, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
He's the guy that had 8 different identities. He was a surgeon. I think he was a pilot. I want to say he was a lawyer. And he would go to the banks and get checks, all these weird things he would do, right? And eventually the FBI finally said, what the hell is this guy doing? He went to prison, I think, for 5 years. And later on, the federal government hired him. Because if he knows how this works, man, we are going to be able to catch everybody else. Do you know Joseph Kennedy's story? He's the market crash guy on what he did and how he manipulated the stock market and made all this money. He would make it go up, make it come down. Do you know who finally hired him? FDR. You know what position he got? He ran SEC. So think about this is like you're going after the biggest market manipulator and you're hiring him as a president to become the guy running SEC. He ran it because he knew what everybody would be doing. And then FDR was able to clean up the financial industry with the manipulation was taking place. And this list goes on. This isn't just these 2 names. There's, other names you can look at. So Joe Kennedy, Frank Abagnale, there's a lot of guys that come in. I think from an outsider looking in, if Joe Kennedy gets hired by FDR, if FBI and the federal government hires Frank Abagnale, if you got these kinds of things going on, what about if Adam Silver or somebody came in and said, hey, we're going to make a call to this is going to be weird. It's going to be strange. People are going to think we're crazy. But we are hiring Tim as a consultant, and he's going to come in and he's going to do X, Y, Z to clean house and kind of show us stuff that he can help out in this area. What would you think if you got a weird call from front office or somebody said, listen, we would like to talk to you about possibly bringing you in, but here's some of the arrangements. Would you even entertain that idea?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you talk about, my love of basketball and growing up and making it to the NBA. I'd be foolish not to, want to entertain that. But I don't think it would happen with the NBA. Possibly maybe one of the other sports leagues. I think it would be an opportunity, or maybe, an individual team. But I just don't think the NBA would do that just based on the black eye, and rightfully so that I did and I put on the league. So. I wouldn't be waiting for that phone call, to be honest with you.
And neither from the teams?
I think it's a possibility, one of the teams in the NBA, but I think it would be something that would not be publicized, that it would be, behind closed doors, that I could break down tape and look at calls. I know there's been some retired referees that have done that for, a lot of the individual teams.
Just by sitting down with you and having a conversation, I'm like, oh my gosh, I mean, I would want to know that as an owner. Especially if I'm in a smaller market guy, not even the bigger market guys, because the bigger market guys, they don't need it. They already got the favoritism going for them, right? I mean, the NBA wants who in the finals today? If you think about it, who does the NBA want in the finals this year? You want Golden State against who?
Boston, Boston or Philly.
That's who you're going to want, right? You're now going to want
Certainly
Toronto.
not Milwaukee.
Certainly not Milwaukee in that market, right? You're not going to want Milwaukee because in one way, if Milwaukee wins, Giannis is staying. Do you really want Giannis staying in that market, or do you want Milwaukee losing and Giannis going to an LA, or Giannis going to a different Dallas market? I don't know if I want him to stay over there, but I don't know. I just look at it from the standpoint of, if this is a game of having edge, if Bezos goes out there and hires some interesting people to give him an edge, former FBI agents, former people like that, why are you hiring former FBI agents? For what? Well, what's the reason behind that? And he runs $1 trillion company. If I'm the NBA, here's how I would notice it. I would hate for a documentary or a movie to be made about your story. So let's just say somebody sees this, because these interviews, sometimes they see it, like a Michael Francis was on our show, ended up getting 10 million views between a couple interviews. One was 6.2, another one's like 2.2, and one in Russian is like 1 million, and then all the other stuff. A&E contacted him, show in Vegas, all this other stuff. I would, if I'm the league, I am much more excited about hiring you than allowing somebody from Hollywood to reach out to you and make a movie about this, like Concussion, because I think that movie is going to hurt the NBA more than the NBA hiring you and signing a 10-year contract with you as a consultant to keep you in as long as XYZ stuff you agree to. That would be my move.
I need you as my agent.
I would make a hell of an agent, but I run a company. But that would be my approach. So let's do a lightning round, and then we'll wrap up and we'll talk about the book and we'll send it up. So I'll give you some names. Just tell me what you think about it. First word that comes to mind, or whatever thing you want to say about them. Okay. First one, one of your best friends in the world, David Stern.
Arrogant.
Okay. LeBron James.
Powerful.
Ron Artest.
Funny.
Really, Michael Jordan.
The GOAT.
Wow. Phil Jackson.
Sarcastic.
Popovich.
Miserable.
Why do you say that?
I just think I've never met somebody night in and night out that could be so miserable. It was never a smile or, in a good mood. It just seemed like it was, no matter what, whether he was up 20 or not,
Interesting. Joey Crawford.
That's a tough one. Good guy.
What was the first 3 words you thought about before you said good guy? That's what I want to know.
It's tough, but he, to be honest with you, he's a giving guy to the community, and he really gives back, and would take the shirt off his back for people.
Danny Crawford.
Talented.
Bovetta.
Shady.
Okay. Rasheed Wallace.
I'm trying to think on the floor or off the floor, but on the floor, nuts.
Rick Mahorn.
Great guy.
Adam Silver.
Different, because I really don't know him. I just know him from what he does now, but I think it's a different take on what David Stern was like. So
better or worse?
Better, much better. I think, professional, likable, seems to want to just do things the right way.
Interesting. Jack Nicholson.
Funny.
Funny, okay. And then that's about it. Those are the names I have for you. Well, so look, if you thought today's interview was interesting, we haven't even gotten into like 50 stories in here. He had an incident one time with Barkley in the locker room with, you just have to see what happened there. a couple incidents with Jordan and Phil Jackson, which was pretty epic, and a lot of other stories. If you're an NBA guy, you want to hear it from his perspective. But one of the things you were telling me about, why don't you talk a little bit about RefPicks? Tell me what this RefPicks website, RefPicks.com, right?
Right, so it's a website for people that gamble casually. Obviously, hopefully nobody has a problem. We basically guide them through the pitfalls of traps to stay away from, and I put out NBA picks based on the referees and the relationships that exist.
Literally.
So if you're into betting on the ball games as a form of entertainment, we guide you through how to hopefully be a winner and not a loser.
RefPicks.com. Well, if ESPN magazine was right, 23 out of 30, if they were right. But anyways, RefPicks.com, we'll put the domain here. So here's what we're going to do. This is what I would like you to do. If you're watching this interview, you're still intrigued by the interview that we have. If there's anybody that we talked about in the interview that you took away and you said, wow, this person has to see this interview, tag Tim and I. Tim's handle's right here, Tim Donaghy 2 on Twitter, and I'm Patrick Bet-David. Send a tweet on Twitter, the first 3 people that say, here's what I took away, and such person in the NBA has to watch this. You do that, we'll send 3 signed copies to the first 3 people that send a tweet. If you're the first 3, you'll get a signed copy from Tim Donaghy being sent over to you. With that being said, Tim, thank you so much for coming out here and being a guest on Valuetainment. Truly, really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Okay, so Tim, obviously you're an NBA guy. I figured we'd play a game of NBA Jam together. And okay, so we're going to do Lakers-Philly. You got Hornacek and Hawkins. What a year. What a year. And I got Vlade and Worthy. Here we go. Now, the only request I have for you before we start the game is please don't fix this game and get the referees on your side. I'm hoping you're... Okay, we're going to play 1 quarter. Get out of here. You played this before.
Oh, I did.
Come on, you played this before. Seriously? Oh my God. Come on. Come on. Boom. Maybe you gave me a break because it's hometown. I appreciate that. I got the odds though, so it's kind of worked in my favor.